Marrying him might have saved my life, but living with him almost destroyed it. Those haunting words echoed in my mind as I stared at the ornate mirror, the golden frame, a stark contrast to the turmoil raging within me. It had all started with a chance encounter at a charity gala, where Alex Preston's charming smile and captivating presence had swept me off my feet. A whirlwind courtship followed, filled with lavish dates, heartfelt promises, and the assurance that he was the man of my dreams. Little did I know that underneath that polished exterior lurked a web of deceit so tangled that it would almost suffocate me. "Eliza, darling, are you ready?" Alex's voice drifted through the bedroom door, snapping me back to reality. "Just a minute," I called out, forcing a smile onto my face as I smoothed the silky fabric of my dress. As I stepped out, Alex's eyes raked over me appreciatively. "You look stunning, my love." He leaned in, planting a kiss on my cheek, his familiar cologne enveloping me. The ride to the Preston family estate was filled with idle chatter, but my mind wandered to the events that had brought me here. Barely 6 months ago, I had been a carefree, independent woman, content with my career and social circle. Then Alex swept in, spinning tales of undying love and a future filled with happiness. Little did I know that by accepting his proposal, I was stepping into a gilded cage. The estate loomed before us, its imposing architecture a testament to the family's wealth and prestige. As we entered, a figure emerged from the shadows, her sharp gaze immediately fixing on me. "Vivian, I'd like you to meet my wife, Eliza," Alex said, his voice tinged with pride. Vivian, Alex's older sister, offered a tight smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Welcome to the family, Eliza." In that moment, I sensed an undercurrent of tension, a subtle warning that all was not as it seemed within the walls of this grand estate. As the evening progressed, surrounded by Alex's closest friends and business associates, I found myself drowning in a sea of polite conversations and forced smiles. Vivian's calculating glances only added to my growing unease. It wasn't until later, when the guests had dispersed and Alex had retired for the night, that I allowed myself to confront the nagging doubts that had taken root. Seated in the dimly lit library, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had entered a world far more complex and dangerous than I could have ever imagined. The question was, would I have the strength to untangle myself from this web before it consumed me completely? The grand foyer of the Preston estate should have filled me with awe, but instead, a sense of unease crept over me as I stepped inside my new home. The opulent chandeliers cast a warm glow, yet the atmosphere felt chilly and unwelcoming. "Let me show you around," Alex said, his hand resting possessively on the small of my back as he guided me through the winding corridors. Each room was more extravagant than the last, from the sprawling living area adorned with priceless antiques to the state-of-the-art kitchen that could have belonged in a 5-star restaurant. It was a world of wealth and privilege I had never experienced before. "And this will be our bedroom," Alex announced, pushing open a set of double doors to reveal a lavish suite that could have easily accommodated a small palace. As I took in the plush furnishings and the breathtaking view from the floor-to-ceiling windows, a movement in the corner of my eye caught my attention. Vivian stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, her gaze piercing. "Impressive, isn't it?" she remarked, her tone laced with sarcasm. "I hope you'll be comfortable here, Eliza." Before I could respond, Alex stepped forward, his demeanor shifting from doting husband to protective brother. "Vivian, I thought we discussed this. Eliza is my wife now, and she deserves to be treated with respect." Vivian's eyes narrowed, and for a moment I could have sworn I saw a flicker of contempt cross her features. "Of course, dear brother, I wouldn't dream of making your precious wife feel unwelcome." With a curt nod, she turned on her heel and disappeared down the hallway, leaving an uncomfortable silence in her wake. "Don't mind her," Alex murmured, wrapping his arms around me from behind. "Vivian has always been a little difficult." His touch, once comforting, now felt suffocating, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there was far more to this sibling rivalry than met the eye. Over the next few weeks, I found myself walking on eggshells, constantly navigating the minefield of tensions that permeated the estate. Vivian's presence was like a dark cloud, casting a shadow over every interaction, her cutting remarks and icy glares leaving me feeling unsettled and unwelcome in my own home. "You shouldn't let her get to you," Alex would say, his reassuring words ringing hollow in the face of Vivian's open hostility. But it wasn't just Vivian's behavior that set my nerves on edge. There were subtle shifts in Alex's demeanor, too. The way he would dismiss my concerns with a wave of his hand, or the way his touch would linger a little too long, as if he were trying to assert his dominance. It was during one of these moments, as he gripped my arm a little too tightly while chastising me for some perceived misstep, that I caught a glimpse of something in his eyes, a flicker of cruelty that sent shivers down my spine. In that instant, I realized that the man I had married was not the charming, loving soul he had pretended to be. There was a darkness lurking beneath the surface, and I found myself questioning everything I thought I knew about him. As I lay awake that night, Alex's even breathing beside me, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had somehow become trapped in a gilded cage with no idea how to escape. The sound of raised voices echoed through the study, shattering the usual tranquility of the estate. Curiosity got the better of me as I crept closer, the muffled words becoming clearer. "Can't keep sweeping this under the rug, Alex. The shareholders are getting restless." It was Vivian's voice, sharp and accusatory. My heart raced as I pressed my ear against the door, straining to make out Alex's response. "I have it under control," he snapped, his tone laced with irritation. "The last thing we need is for word to get out about our creative accounting practices." Creative accounting practices? My mind whirled as the implications of those words sank in. Could Alex be involved in something illegal? Before I could ponder further, the sound of footsteps approaching sent me scurrying away from the door, my heart pounding in my chest. I busied myself with straightening the vase on the hallway table, trying to appear nonchalant as Vivian emerged from the study, her face flushed with anger. "Eliza," she said curtly, her gaze sweeping over me with undisguised disdain. "I didn't realize you were lurking about." "I wasn't," I stammered, my palms growing clammy. "I was just passing by." Vivian's eyes narrowed, and for a moment I thought she might call out my lie. But then her expression softened ever so slightly, and she leaned in closer. "You should be careful, Eliza," she murmured, her voice low and laced with warning. "There are things happening in this family that you know nothing about." Before I could respond, she had swept past me, leaving me reeling in her wake. What did she mean by that? Was she implying that Alex was involved in something illegal, something that could put our entire family at risk? The questions swirled in my mind, but I knew better than to confront Alex directly. Instead, I bided my time, keeping my eyes and ears open for any clue that might shed light on the shadows that seemed to be closing in around us. It wasn't long before I stumbled upon my first piece of evidence. Late one night, as Alex worked at his desk in the study, I slipped in under the guise of bringing him a nightcap. As I placed the glass on the desk, a folder caught my eye, a collection of financial statements and ledgers, their pages littered with suspicious-looking entries and crossed-out figures. My heart pounded as I glimpsed the words Shell Corporation and Offshore Accounts scrawled in the margins. I knew then that my suspicions were well-founded. Alex was involved in something far more sinister than I could have ever imagined. As the weeks passed, I became a silent observer, gathering what information I could while maintaining a careful facade of ignorance. Whispered conversations, coded emails, and furtive glances all added to the mounting pile of evidence that pointed to one inescapable truth. My husband was a liar and a cheat, and the very foundation of our marriage was built on deceit. Yet even as the walls closed in around us, I couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope that perhaps I could find a way to untangle this tangled web before it consumed us both. The soft glow of the bedside lamp cast eerie shadows across the room as I pored over the documents scattered on the desk. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages, each one revealing a new layer of Alex's deception. Financial statements riddled with discrepancies, emails detailing shady business dealings, and a trail of breadcrumbs leading straight to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. The evidence was damning, and yet a part of me still clung to the hope that there was some innocent explanation, some misunderstanding that could justify the chaos unfolding before my eyes. It was then that the ping of an incoming message shattered the silence, the sound making me jump. Alex's phone vibrated on the nightstand, the screen illuminating with a new notification. Against my better judgment, I reached for it, my heart pounding in my chest. The message was innocuous at first glance. A simple, "Can't wait to see you tomorrow" from a contact labeled Jessica. But as I scrolled further, my breath caught in my throat. Message after message, each one more explicit than the last, painted a clear picture of Alex's infidelity. "Missing your touch. Counting down the hours until I can hold you again. You know how much I crave you." The words blurred together as hot tears stung my eyes. The man I had trusted, the man I had loved with every fiber of my being, had been deceiving me from the start. His promises of devotion were nothing but hollow lies, his vows of fidelity cast aside with callous disregard. The sound of footsteps in the hallway jolted me back to reality, and I scrambled to gather the scattered documents, my hands shaking uncontrollably. In my haste, I knocked over a picture frame, the shattering glass echoing like a gunshot in the stillness of the night. The bedroom door flew open, and there stood Alex, his face contorted in a mixture of anger and fear. "What the hell are you doing?" he snarled, his eyes landing on the incriminating papers clutched in my trembling hands. My voice faltered as I struggled to form a coherent response, the weight of his betrayal crushing me from all sides. Alex's gaze hardened, and he advanced towards me, his movements slow and deliberate, like a predator closing in on its prey. "You weren't supposed to see those," he hissed, snatching the documents from my grasp. "Alex, please?" I pleaded, my heart pounding in my chest. "Just tell me the truth." For a moment, his expression softened, and I dared to hope that he might offer an explanation, a chance to salvage the shattered remnants of our relationship. But then, his lips twisted into a cruel smile, and the illusion was shattered. "The truth?" he sneered, leaning in close enough for me to smell the whiskey on his breath. "The truth is, you're nothing but a means to an end, Eliza, a pretty little trophy wife to help me maintain appearances while I take care of business." His words cut deep, each one a razor-sharp blade slicing through the fragile threads that had bound us together. In that moment, I knew there was no turning back, no chance for reconciliation. The man I thought I knew was gone, replaced by a monster driven by greed and deceit. "If you breathe a word of this to anyone," Alex continued, his grip tightening around my wrist until I winced in pain, "I'll make sure you regret the day you ever crossed me." As he stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him, I sank to the floor, my body racked with sobs. The world as I knew it had come crashing down around me, leaving me adrift in a sea of lies and broken promises. But even as despair threatened to consume me, a flicker of determination ignited deep within. I would not be a victim, not anymore. It was time to take back control, no matter the cost. The heavy oak door creaked open, and Vivian slipped into the dimly lit library, her eyes scanning the room before settling on me. "Eliza, what's going on?" "Your message sounded urgent." I took a deep breath, steeling my resolve. "I know everything, Vivian, about Alex's illegal activities, his offshore accounts, his mistress." Vivian's expression hardened, and for a moment I thought she might deny it all. But then her shoulders sagged, and she sank into the nearest armchair, defeat etched across her features. "So, he finally showed his true colors," she muttered, her voice laced with bitterness. "I tried to warn you, Eliza, but you were too blinded by his charm to see the monster he really is." "You knew?" I felt a surge of anger rising within me. "You knew what he was up to, and you didn't say anything?" Vivian's gaze met mine, her eyes filled with a mixture of remorse and determination. I had my suspicions, but I could never get my hands on any solid proof. That snake always covered his tracks too well. "Well, now we have the proof," I said, sliding the stack of incriminating documents across the table towards her. "And we're going to use it to bring him down." Vivian's perfectly manicured brows arched in surprise. "We? You want to take over the company, don't you?" I pressed on, my voice gaining strength with each word. "Well, this is our chance. Together, we can expose Alex's misdeeds and get him out of the way for good." A slow smile spread across Vivian's face, and for the first time I saw a glimmer of respect in her eyes. "I have to admit, I underestimated you, Eliza. You've got more fire in you than I gave you credit for." She leaned forward, her gaze intense. "All right, let's do this, but we have to be smart about it. Alex is a snake, and he'll stop at nothing to protect his precious empire. Over the next few days, Vivian and I pored over the evidence, meticulously cataloging every shred of proof, every damning email and suspicious transaction. It was a delicate dance, carefully planning our next moves while maintaining a facade of normalcy around Alex. The tension in the house was palpable, with Alex constantly on edge, his eyes narrowed in suspicion whenever Vivian and I were in the same room. But we played our parts well, acting the dutiful wife and the supportive sister, all the while plotting his downfall. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Vivian asked one night as we finalized our strategy. "Once we set this in motion, there's no going back." I thought of Alex's cruel words, the way he had threatened and belittled me, and a steely resolve settled over me. "I'm ready. He's going to pay for what he's done, one way or another." The day of the board meeting arrived, and Vivian and I took our seats at the long mahogany table, our game faces firmly in place. Alex strode in, his confidence barely masking the undercurrent of tension that rippled through the room. As he launched into his polished presentation, projecting financial figures and growth projections onto the screen behind him, I caught Vivian's eye. A slight nod was all it took, and we made our move. "Actually, Alex," Vivian's voice cut through the air like a knife, "I think we should take a closer look at those numbers." Alex faltered, his bravado slipping for just a moment as Vivian began pulling up document after document, laying bare the truth about his misdeeds. The room erupted into chaos, with board members demanding explanations and lawyers scrambling to take notes. Through it all, Alex maintained a veneer of composure, his eyes darting between Vivian and me with a mixture of fury and disbelief. But as the evidence mounted, as the weight of his lies threatened to crush him, the mask finally slipped. "You'll pay for this, Eliza," he snarled, his voice dripping with venom. "Mark my words, you'll regret the day you crossed me." But as I met his gaze, unflinching, I knew that the power had finally shifted. The tangled web of lies he had woven was unraveling before our very eyes, and there was no escape for the monster at its center. The boardroom descended into chaos as the full extent of Alex's deception was laid bare. Lawyers scribbled furiously, shareholders hurled accusations, and through it all, Alex stood frozen, his face contorted in a mask of fury. "How dare you?" he snarled, rounding on Vivian and me. "You have no idea what you've done." Vivian met his gaze, unflinching. "We know exactly what we've done, dear brother. We've exposed you for the liar and fraud that you are." A vein throbbed in Alex's temple as he struggled to maintain his composure. "This is all a misunderstanding," he insisted, his voice strained. "I can explain." "Save it, Alex," one of the board members snapped. "The evidence is overwhelming. Your underhanded dealings, the offshore accounts, the financial manipulations, it's all right here in black and white." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room, and I could see the panic flickering in Alex's eyes as his carefully constructed facade crumbled around him. "You're making a grave mistake," he warned, his gaze shifting to me. "You'll regret this, Eliza." I squared my shoulders, refusing to be intimidated by his empty threats. "The only mistake was ever trusting you." As security guards moved in to escort him out, Alex lunged forward, his face twisted into an ugly snarl. "You'll pay for this, you little bitch!" Strong arms restrained him, but not before his fist connected with the side of my face, sending stars bursting across my vision. I stumbled backward, clutching my throbbing cheek, as Vivian rushed to my side. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. I nodded, blinking back tears of pain and humiliation. "I'm fine. It's nothing compared to what he deserves." As Alex was dragged from the room, his curses and threats echoing down the hallway, a heavy silence settled over the boardroom. It was finally over. The tangled web of lies that had ensnared us all had been severed, and the monster at its center was exposed for the world to see. In the days and weeks that followed, the fallout from Alex's downfall rippled outward, like shockwaves from a seismic event. Lawsuits were filed, investigations launched, and the once mighty Preston empire teetered on the brink of collapse. Through it all, Vivian remained a steadfast ally, guiding the company through the turbulent waters with a deft hand. Together, we worked tirelessly to salvage what remained, to rebuild the tarnished reputation and restore the trust that Alex had so carelessly squandered. It wasn't easy. There were whispers and pointed stares, accusations and innuendo that threatened to drag us down into the mire of scandal. But we persevered, driven by a shared determination to rise from the ashes and forge a new path forward. As for Alex, his world crumbled around him in spectacular fashion. The once charming, larger-than-life figure was reduced to a mere shadow of his former self, his arrogance replaced by desperation as his allies deserted him one by one. I watched from afar as his lavish lifestyle unraveled, his expensive suits traded for prison jumpsuits, his palatial estate seized by the authorities. It was a fate he had brought upon himself, and yet a part of me still felt a twinge of sadness at the sight of his downfall. But that fleeting moment of pity was quickly overshadowed by a sense of triumph and relief. The nightmare was finally over. The tangled web that had ensnared me was no more, and I was free to reclaim the life that had been stolen from me. As I stood in the doorway of my new apartment, taking in the simple furnishings and the warm sunlight streaming through the windows, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. This was a fresh start, a chance to leave the past behind and forge a new path on my own terms. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while I felt a glimmer of hope. I was no longer a victim, no longer a pawn in someone else's twisted game. I was a survivor, a warrior who had stared down the darkness and emerged victorious. And as I stepped out into the world, head held high, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, I would face them with the same unwavering resilience that had carried me through the storm. The headline screamed Alex's downfall, plastered across every newspaper and news channel in the country. Business mogul exposed as fraud, Preston empire crumbles amidst scandal, each headline more sensational than the last. As I flipped through the pages, my eyes scanning the sordid details of his misdeeds, a part of me still couldn't believe how swiftly everything had unraveled. Just weeks ago, Alex had been the picture of success, a titan of industry with the world at his feet. Now he was a disgraced pariah, his name synonymous with deceit and corruption. The real surprise, however, came in the form of the public's reaction. Instead of sympathy or outrage on his behalf, there was a pervasive sense of schadenfreude, a collective glee at witnessing the fall of a man who had lived so ostentatiously, so arrogantly. He had it coming, one commentator declared on a primetime news program. A man like that, with his penchant for excess and his blatant disregard for the rules, was bound to come crashing down eventually. As the days passed, the avalanche of negative publicity only intensified. Former business associates and allies distanced themselves, scrambling to salvage their own reputations. Even Alex's closest confidants turned on him, offering damning testimonies in exchange for leniency from the authorities. Through it all, Vivian remained a steadfast presence by my side, guiding the company through the turbulent waters with a deft hand. Together, we worked tirelessly to reshape the narrative, to restore the trust and credibility that had been shattered by Alex's actions. It wasn't an easy task. There were skeptics at every turn, those who doubted our ability to rise from the ashes of such a colossal scandal. But Vivian was relentless, her determination fueled by a burning desire to reclaim her family's legacy. This company was built on generations of hard work and integrity, she declared in a press conference, her steely gaze fixed on the cameras. We will not allow one man's greed and hubris to tarnish that. As the legal proceedings unfolded, Alex's once formidable empire crumbled around him. Assets were seized, bank accounts frozen, and his lavish lifestyle reduced to a mere memory. Gone were the designer suits and luxury cars, replaced by the drab uniforms and sterile confines of a prison cell. I caught glimpses of him during the highly publicized trial, his once confident demeanor replaced by a haunted, defeated expression. It was a far cry from the charming, charismatic figure who had once swept me off my feet, and I couldn't help but feel a twinge of pity amidst the overwhelming sense of vindication. But that fleeting moment of empathy was quickly overshadowed by the memories of his cruelty, the way he had manipulated and betrayed me without a shred of remorse. This was the fate he had chosen for himself, and he would have to live with the consequences. As the final gavel fell, sealing Alex's fate with a lengthy prison sentence, a palpable sense of relief washed over me. The nightmare was finally over, the tangled web of lies that had ensnared me severed for good. In the aftermath, Vivian stepped forward to assume the mantle of leadership, her steady hand guiding the company through the turbulent waters of rebranding and restructuring. Under her guidance, the once tarnished empire began to regain its footing, slowly but surely clawing its way back to respectability. As for me, I found solace in the simplicity of my new life. Gone were the lavish trappings and the constant scrutiny that had once been my reality. In their place was a newfound sense of freedom, a chance to start anew without the suffocating weight of Alex's lies and manipulations. It wasn't an easy journey, of course. There were moments of doubt and vulnerability, times when the ghosts of the past threatened to drag me back into the darkness. But each time, I drew strength from the knowledge that I had survived, that I had emerged from the fire stronger and more resilient than ever before. As the months passed, the wounds began to heal, and a newfound sense of clarity took root. I was no longer defined by the trauma of my past, no longer a victim of circumstances beyond my control. I was a survivor, a warrior who had stared down the abyss and emerged victorious. And as I stepped out into the world, head held high, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, I would face them with the same unwavering determination that had carried me through the storm. The sun filtered through the sheer curtains, bathing my new apartment in a warm, golden glow. It was a far cry from the opulent grandeur of the Preston estate, but as I sipped my morning coffee, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. This was my sanctuary, my safe haven from the chaos and turmoil of the past. Gone were the lavish trappings and the suffocating weight of expectation. In their place was a simple, uncluttered existence, a life of my own making, free from the tangled web of lies and manipulation that had once threatened to consume me. A soft knock at the door pulled me from my reverie, and I padded across the hardwood floor to answer it. Vivian stood on the other side, her signature power suit traded for a casual sundress, her face radiant with a genuine smile. "Good morning," she greeted me warmly, enveloping me in a sisterly embrace. "I thought I'd stop by and see how you're settling in." I ushered her inside, marveling at how far our relationship had come. Months ago, we had been adversaries, caught in the crosshairs of Alex's deceit. Now, we were allies, bound by a shared experience that had forged an unbreakable bond of trust and respect. "It's perfect," I assured her, gesturing around the cozy living room. "Simple, but perfect." Vivian nodded, her eyes sweeping over the space with a critical but approving gaze. "I'm glad. You deserve a fresh start, Eliza, a chance to rebuild your life on your own terms." We settled onto the plush sofa, and I couldn't help but notice the subtle changes in Vivian's demeanor. Gone was the sharp, calculating persona she had once worn like armor. In its place was a warmth and vulnerability that I had never seen before. "How are things at the company?" I asked, sipping my coffee. Vivian's smile faltered ever so slightly, a hint of weariness creeping into her expression. "It's been a challenge, to say the least. Rebuilding the brand, restoring trust with our partners and shareholders, it's been an uphill battle." "But you're doing it," I reassured her. "You're turning things around, slowly but surely." A spark of pride flickered in her eyes, and she nodded resolutely. "Yes, we are. It's not easy, but I'm determined to reclaim our family's legacy, to show the world that the Preston name still stands for something." As we lapsed into comfortable silence, I couldn't help but reflect on the incredible journey we had both undertaken. From the depths of despair and betrayal, we had risen like phoenixes from the ashes, emerging stronger and more resilient than ever before. The legal battles had been grueling, the emotional toll nearly overwhelming at times. But through it all, we had remained resolute, steadfast in our determination to see justice served and our lives restored. And now, as I looked around my humble abode, I felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over me. Gratitude for the strength that had carried me through the darkest of times, and for the unwavering support of the woman who had become more than just an ally. She was family, in the truest sense of the word. "Eliza," Vivian's voice broke the silence, her tone earnest. "I know words can never undo the trauma you endured, but I want you to know how deeply sorry I am for not seeing the truth sooner." I reached out, squeezing her hand reassuringly. "You have nothing to apologize for, Vivian. We were both caught in Alex's web of lies. The important thing is that we found our way out, together." A small smile tugged at the corner of her lips, and she nodded, her eyes shining with a mixture of gratitude and understanding. In that moment, I knew that the scars of the past would never fully fade. The memories of Alex's cruelty, the bitter taste of betrayal, would always linger in the shadows of my mind. But I had emerged from the darkness stronger and more resilient than ever before. As I bid farewell to Vivian and settled back into the comfort of my new home, I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of hope for the future. The tangled web that had once threatened to strangle me was severed, the monster at its center vanquished, and I was free to chart my own course. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of excitement rather than trepidation. I was no longer a victim, defined by the trauma of my past. I was a survivor, a warrior who had stared down the abyss and emerged victorious. And as I gazed out at the bustling city skyline, a world of possibilities stretched before me, waiting to be embraced with open arms. I never expected to hear my brother-in-law, Dalton, accuse me of neglecting a child I didn't know existed. This confrontation was the first crack in the facade of my seemingly peaceful life. "Alara, we need to talk," Dalton said, his usually cheerful face now deadly serious. "It's about the baby." "What baby?" I asked, thoroughly confused. Dalton looked shocked. "Wait, are you actually denying abandoning your infant on my doorstep?" "What? No. I have no idea what you're talking about," I insisted. Had everyone gone mad? Dalton ran his hands through his hair in exasperation. "I found a baby girl wrapped in blankets next to my front door 3 days ago. She came with a note, your handwriting, saying her name was Amelia and that you were unable to care for her anymore." My heart was pounding. A baby? With my handwritten note? This made no sense. "Dalton, you know I don't have any children beside Marcus and Lily. I swear on my life I did not abandon a baby at your home." Dalton searched my face, looking more bewildered by the second. "Well, if you didn't, then who did?" A tense silence descended between us. My mind was reeling. Who would do something so cruel, so calculated? A disturbing thought emerged. What if this wasn't just a cruel prank? What if this connected somehow to the unusual behavior I'd noticed from my husband Bennett recently? His emotional distance, secret phone calls, vague explanations about his late nights at the office. Could this be related? I had brushed aside my creeping doubts until now. But this incident felt like more than mere coincidence. Someone was trying to frame me. But for what purpose? Dalton's next words interrupted my spiraling thoughts. "If you're telling the truth, we need to involve the police. This is serious." As much as I wanted to get authorities involved, something held me back. Call it intuition or paranoia, but I needed to do some investigating myself first. "Let's hold off on that for now," I said slowly. "I intend to get to the bottom of this myself." Dalton looked like he wanted to argue, but then nodded. "Okay, but please keep me informed, Alara. Little Amelia deserves some answers. Trust me, I don't plan on letting this go until the truth comes out." With those ominous words, I left Dalton's house in a daze. As I drove home, a million anxious thoughts ran through my mind. Who had the audacity to use my identity? Why fabricate the existence of a baby? And most importantly, was Bennett hiding disturbing secrets behind his pillar of respectability? This mysterious false accusation felt like the tip of a sinister iceberg, but I was intent on dredging up the truth, no matter what damage it inflicted on my family in the process. I had a feeling things would only get messier from here, but I was determined to handle it on my own terms, confronting whoever was spinning this intricate web of lies. As I pulled into my driveway, a wave of foreboding washed over me. I didn't know it yet, but this first crack in my family's facade would soon shatter wide open, and the resulting debris would leave no relationship unscathed, least of all my own marriage. The drive back home gave me time to think. Who would have the cruel audacity to frame me for abandoning a baby? The more I considered possible suspects, the more my thoughts focused on one person, my husband, Bennett. His recent emotional distance and secrecy around his work made him seem like the prime suspect. I realized it was time I investigated whether he was truly the respectable man I believed I had married. As soon as I entered the house, I called out, "Bennett, we need to talk." "Now." He strolled into the kitchen, casual as ever. "What's up, babe?" I studied his expression. No guilt, no curiosity, just bland indifference. I decided to start testing the waters. Do you remember my brother-in-law Dalton and his wife Trinity? Bennett nodded absently as he scrolled through his phone. Red flag number 1. Well, Dalton came to me with something deeply disturbing today. I paused, gauging his response. He claimed I left a baby girl on his doorstep with a note in my handwriting. Have you ever heard anything so bizarre? Bennett's head jerked up, eyes wide. Wait, what? A baby? Why would your brother make something like that up? He seemed rattled rather than merely confused. Red flag number 2. I crossed my arms. Yes, that's exactly what I'd like to know. I was hoping you could help me get to the bottom of who would falsely use my identity. Bennett shook his head, avoiding my scrutinizing gaze. I have no idea what kind of game your family is playing, Alara. This is between you all. His evasion sparked my anger. Some sick, twisted person tried to frame me for abandoning an infant, Bennett. Don't you even care? He held up his hands defensively. Of course I care. I just think this is some weird scheme from your dysfunctional family, that's all. I stared at him in disbelief. Was he actually implying my family had fabricated this baby drama? Now convinced of his deception, I decided it was time to uncover evidence. Over the next few days, I cautiously observed Bennett's actions. He frequently locked himself in his home office, guarding his computer screen from view. Multiple questionable withdrawals appeared in our bank statements, always in the hundreds of dollars range. Strangest of all, he began taking phone calls in secrecy, speaking in hushed tones. My worst suspicions seemed to be confirmed. My model husband was definitely hiding something, and I was done biting my tongue. After his third suspicious late-night phone conversation that week, I confronted him in our bedroom. This time I let all pretenses drop. Are you having an affair? I asked bluntly. Bennett gaped. What? Where's this coming from? Oh, I don't know. Maybe all the shady bank withdrawals, the locked computer screen, furtive late-night calls. My voice dripped with sarcasm. Trapped, Bennett grasped for excuses. It's work, okay? I'm dealing with a stressful client. Don't lie to me, I shouted. What do you take me for? Who have you been speaking with? Cornered, Bennett finally snapped. Fine. It's Corinne. We've been seeing each other for months now. She's carrying my baby. His confession knocked the breath from my lungs. The room spun as the weight of his betrayal sunk in. Get out, I whispered, trembling with fury. Without another word, he grabbed a duffel bag and left. Meanwhile, I sank to my knees, gutted by grief for the death of my marriage. But underneath the pain bubbled a growing resolve. This was far from over. I would make him pay for every deceitful transgression. Bennett had sparked a hunger for revenge inside me. And I aimed to fully satisfy that craving, no matter what destruction it left in its wake. In the painful days following Bennett's betrayal, I oscillated between outrage and anguish. When my sister Julia came over to check on me, I unleashed all the fury and heartbreak I had bottled up. I gave that deceitful pig the best years of my life, I raged. And he threw it all away for some cheap affair. Julia shook her head in disgust. Alara, you were always too good for him. What a spineless coward. Not just a coward, a criminal mastermind, I replied. I showed her the bank statements riddled with inexplicable withdrawals. He's been funneling money and who knows what else behind my back this whole time. Julia scrutinized the statements, eyes narrowing. Have you spoken with the bank about this? Not yet. I wanted to do some more digging first. An idea sparked. Actually, Julia, could you call the bank and inquire about recent account activity? Don't disclose our relations. Just say you are a customer care representative following up on potential fraud. Julia raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Clever approach, sis. Consider it done. As Julia got to work, I decided to search Bennett's home office. Rifling through the room yielded a trove of clues, scraps with an unfamiliar woman's number, hotel receipts, time-stamped during Bennett's supposed business trips, shopping bags suggesting the affair had progressed to gift purchases. One receipt in particular made my blood run cold. It was from a boutique children's store for a $300 crystal baby rattle engraved with Amelia. The fake baby from Dalton's shocking accusation. This proved Bennett was involved in that cruel scheme to frame me. Another chilling discovery, receipt from an upscale jeweler for a diamond tennis bracelet with an inscription saying, "To Corinne, all my love." The other woman's name. So the betrayal ran deeper than I realized. He had promised this secret mistress not only a child but a future together. Overwhelmed with mounting evidence of Bennett's duplicity, I sank to the floor and broke down in tears. How could I have shared my life and bed with such a stranger? In that moment of despair, I heard Julia's stunned gasp behind me. She had entered silently, fresh intel in hand, but it barely registered through the pain of my shattered illusion of Bennett. "Alara," Julia whispered. The bank confirmed the withdrawals were transferred to an unknown offshore account, and customers matching Bennett and this Corinne woman's profiles made huge cash withdrawals over the past few months. Her words sliced through my sorrow. I slowly rose to my feet, resolve stealing. "This ends now," I declared coldly. "I want everything that Snake ever took from me restored with interest." Julia nodded. "We'll destroy him, Alara. In court and the court of public opinion, I'm here for whatever you need." Her solidarity meant everything in that agonizing time. With my sister by my side, I marched ahead, directly into confrontation with the two people who had ruptured my reality. Yes, vengeance waited on the horizon. But first I needed to meet the woman who had upended my life at Bennett's behest. She was an unseen adversary thus far. Tomorrow I would come face to face with Corinne at last. The damage was already done, but I refused to let her fade into the shadows without claiming a piece of my wrath. Hell hath no fury like the public destruction of two secret lovers. I would ensure both paid the ultimate price for their callous selfishness. Starting now. The next morning I sat parked outside the address listed on the receipts, Corinne's home. Confronting the woman who helped destroy my marriage wouldn't undo the damage, but I needed to look my husband's mistress in the eyes. I knocked sharply, simmering rage just under the surface. Moments later, the door swung open. "Can I help ye?" Corinne started politely before recognition flashed across her face. She paled. "You must be Alara." "Must be quite the shock seeing the wife of the man you've been screwing," I replied coldly. Corinne flinched. "I think you should leave." She moved to close the door, but I jammed my foot in the gap. "Not until you explain yourself." Just then, a baby's cries rang out from inside the house. Corinne looked stricken. The proof cooed loudly, just a room away. Red-hot fury propelled me through the doorway. "Get out! You can't barge in here!" Corinne shouted. I stormed toward the nursery, taking in the custom-decorated space stocked with plush toys. Rage simmered as I spotted the crystal rattle amongst other lavish baby accessories. Bennett had set up his mistress quite comfortably while draining my accounts. Corinne planted herself between me and the crib. "Please, you're upsetting her," she begged, fretfully jiggling the howling newborn. Seeing the baby punctured my anger momentarily. She was an innocent in this mess. I took a deep breath. I didn't come here to harm Amelia. I just need answers. Corinne searched my face warily. Finding no malice towards her daughter, she nodded slowly. "Okay, let's talk." Over tea a short while later, Corinne filled in the missing pieces. She had met Bennett at an office networking event a year ago. He hid his marriage while promising her a future together. "Bennett said so many times he was going to leave you," she insisted tearfully. "He swore we'd be a real family once the divorce was finalized." Hearing Corinne echo the falsehoods and excuses Bennett had fed me sparked a realization. We were both his victims. Yes, Corinne knowingly engaged in an affair with a married man. But how could she reject Bennett's ardent efforts when she believed me already rejected? She had been manipulated just the same. I saw now we were two women pitted against each other by a master deceiver. United, however, we could reclaim the dignity he had robbed from us both. "You were wrong to get involved with my husband," I said frankly, "but the blame lies with Bennett for weaving this tangled web." Corinne looked relieved I wasn't threatening retribution anymore. "You didn't deserve how he deceived you either. I'm so sorry." She hesitated before adding quietly, "Can you ever forgive me?" I considered her plea. She was no innocent, but she had been seduced by Bennett's poisonous words like me, and I could use an ally against the man who had shattered us both. "We both need to move forward from Bennett's lies, if only for our own sakes," I finally replied. "I'm willing to forgive if you'll help me build a case exposing his duplicity." "Anything," Corinne agreed fervently. "Seeing you so strong facing him down, I don't want that coward getting away with this either." A wary partnership emerged between us then, two scorned women aligning to reclaim what was ours. Bennett wouldn't know what hit him. The evidence against my philandering husband had been damning already, but with Corinne's testimony of his financial malfeasance, he wouldn't stand a chance. Hell truly had no fury compared to two lied-to ladies teaming against a Casanova manipulator. Bennett would finally face the consequences of his callous machinations, and Corinne and I would ensure he felt the pain and destruction he had cruelly unleashed on our lives tenfold. Over the next week, Corinne and I gathered evidence exposing the depth of Bennett's lies. He had spun an elaborate web indeed, one that implicating my own sister Julia as his accomplice. The story emerged slowly as Corinne and I followed paper trails and connected timelines. Bennett had leaned on Julia's connections at the bank where she worked to funnel money discreetly. When withdrawals raised red flags, Julia helped cover his tracks in exchange for a cut of the siphoned cash. Meanwhile, Bennett wove stories to Corinne about me refusing him a divorce while convincing me his frequent business travel was work-related. The night all the pieces fell into place, Corinne and I sat dumbstruck, gobsmacked by the extent of Bennett's machinations. He had masterfully played us all, his unknowing wife, trusting mistress, and own sister-in-law. "I knew your husband was selfish, but sociopathic is more accurate," Corinne noted. "He destroyed so many lives without blinking." "That's how narcissists operate, leave wrecked relationships and distrust in their wake," I replied wearily, headache building. Corinne nodded slowly before asking the question we couldn't ignore. "So where do we go from here? Bennett and Julia have fleeced all of us blind." Red-hot anger reignited in my chest, fueling my hunger for justice. We expose them, publicly. A slow smile spread across Corinne's face as my plan took shape. "I want everything stripped away, career, credibility, dignity," I continued viciously. "We leak all the evidence to his partners and the local paper. Once the board and clients knows he's a lying thief, he'll be professionally ruined. And socially exiled once our circle discovers his affairs and manipulation," Corinne added, eyes blazing. In that moment, a nuclear revenge plot coalesced. Bennett wouldn't just lose his career and reputation, he would lose his freedom once I brought fraud charges. And arrogant Julia would finally see consequences too, instead of a raise for her troubles. Soon Corinne and I hashed the finishing touches, steadied by shared righteous anger. The decisive confrontation came on Saturday at my in-laws' 40th anniversary party. All the key players would be present as Corinne and I prepared to detonate the truth atom bomb. My body thrummed with adrenaline as we entered my former home, now occupied by Bennett, and, evidently, Julia too. Time to rip their web of lies to shreds. I clinked a knife against my champagne glass, capturing the room's attention. As all eyes turned our way, Corinne and I moved to the front, arms loaded with printouts. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate this milestone with our family," I began smoothly. "Before we toast, I have a special slideshow commemorating the honored couple, with a focus on truth and reconciliation." Murmurs rippled through the room. Bennett paled, realization dawning. "You see, the past year has revealed certain flaws in relationships, integrity, and trust," I continued. "But the truth always reveals itself eventually." With that, I pressed play, launching the downfall of not just my cheating scoundrel husband, but all his enablers. Sometimes revenge is a dish best served as a multimedia presentation. The room watched in stunned horror as sordid secrets of the darling couple emerged alongside financial crimes implicating Julia. Finally, the monsters wore their villainy openly instead of hiding behind polite facades. Tonight, justice got served indeed, ice cold just like their hearts. A heavy silence descended on the room as the slideshow ended. Shocked faces stared back at me, my own parents stricken with betrayal. I kept my gaze locked on Bennett and Julia, defiantly waiting for their response. They had spun a web of deception that was now unraveled before the whole family. Time to reap what they sowed. Bennett moved first, stepping forward with hands raised in placation. "Everyone, please just stay calm. I'm sure we can explain this misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" I interrupted sharply. "Is that what you call draining private accounts to fund your mistress and love child?" Mouths dropped open and scandalized gasps echoed. Bennett paled under the weight of judgment, settling over the room. Beside him, Julia jumped to his defense. "Alara, how could you embarrass our family like this? You're clearly distraught and not thinking straight." I bristled at her patronizing tone. as if I was some hysterical housewife instead of the orchestrator of their downfall. "Oh, I'm thinking perfectly clear thanks to having my rose-colored glasses ripped off," I retorted. "The proof is all there in black and white. Or do you deny helping your brother-in-law funnel stolen money offshore, dear sister-in-law?" Julia's eyes blazed, but she held her tongue, caught. The rest of my family stared, betrayal and disgust hardening their expressions. Meanwhile, Corinne stepped forward, my unlikely ally in this quest for justice. "I think you all deserve to hear the truth directly from the victim here. Yes, Bennett promised me a life and family, letting me believe I was his one and only." Her voice broke as she gestured to where my ashen-faced parents stood. "While he robbed their daughter blind. How could you?" My mother finally choked out at Bennett, tearful. My father just shook his head. Grim disappointment etched across his face. Finally confronted with irreversible evidence, Bennett crumbled. "I'm sorry, I just wanted more than I had and things spiraled out of control." He turned pleading eyes on me. "Alara, we can still fix this." But I silenced him with a scathing glare. "The damage is done. Did you think you could just take and take without consequences?" I let icy disgust fill my tone. "Well, now the whole family sees your true colors. I want you out of my home and my life for good." A heavy quiet followed my pronouncement before my father stepped forward. "You heard my daughter. I want you off my property immediately." He turned his glare on Julia, too. "Both of you." Their web of lies dissolved fully then. Bennett begged and argued, but my family turned their backs, repulsed by his greed and callousness. Meanwhile, Julia stormed out silently, knowing she was equally scorned. I watched them go with relief and strange hollowness. The quest for revenge had consumed me, driving me relentlessly once the truth emerged. Now seeing justice served, I wondered what came next. But meeting Corinne's grateful eyes across the room reminded me of one certainty. Whatever future awaited wouldn't include deception or betrayals. We women had reclaimed our dignity and broken free. In the weeks following the climactic showdown, the consequences for Bennett and Julia's deceit cascaded quickly. My parents insisted Bennett sign over our shared assets and properties to ensure I retained what was rightfully mine. Through the humiliation and anger, I think Bennett almost felt relief relinquishing his web of lies. But freedom came at a steep price, including his career. Once word spread of the financial schemes and affairs exposed at the anniversary party, Bennett's partners unanimously voted to oust him. As further evidence emerged, he had embezzled company funds. His reputation lay in tatters. No firm in town would touch him now, despite his frantic attempts to minimize the damage. Meanwhile, Julia faced her own share of fallout. The bank fired her for gross ethical violations. Our parents made clear she was never welcome in their home again after so callously plundering their own daughter's accounts. Her fiancé broke off their engagement, unwilling to marry someone so mercenary. Watching the ripple effects of their disgrace, I oscillated between satisfaction and sadness. I had needed to reveal the ugly truth, if only to regain my own power and agency after being manipulated and violated. But seeing my sister cut off from the family she had betrayed stirred an ache of grief I couldn't ignore. In my lowest moments, I saw how the quest for revenge had also splintered my own relationships and emotional foundations. I may have regained material and legal standing, but bitterness gnawed inside nonetheless. My saving grace became Corinne and little Amelia. Having sister survivors made even the most desolate days bearable. During playdates, Corinne affirmed over and over that coming forward had been worth the pain and judgment we endured. Bennett deserved facing consequences rather than quietly moving on to his next scheme emboldened. Watching Amelia babble and try to roll over, I had to agree. There was relief in ripping the mask off deceivers rather than allowing them to slowly poison relationships from behind an innocent facade. Still, when Bennett showed up at my doorstep one rainy Tuesday, desperation carved into his face, old emotions churned again. "Alara, please, have mercy," he implored, suit bedraggled and filthy. "I can't manage the payments ordered in the settlement. You'll still get the money if you just give me time." Gazing at this pitiful, broken man soaked by the rain, I remembered late nights filled with laughter and intimacy from another lifetime. Back when I thought I knew Bennett's heart simply because he showed me his body. What a naive fool. Should have considered that before you decided to lie and cheat your way through our marriage, I said bluntly, contempt thickening my voice. I'll expect every last penny paid. The court date won't change. I moved to close the door, but Bennett jammed his foot in desperately. Please, have some compassion. His voice broke, pathetic. You loved me once. Manipulation still, attempting to appeal to tenderness he hadn't earned. My eyes hardened to stone. The man I loved never really existed. Send any future requests to my lawyer. The door clicked decisively. I caught a glimpse of Bennett's crestfallen face as I turned away without hesitation. The time for mercy had expired. I owed that deceiver nothing now, including sympathy. Finally forced to reckon with bleak reality alone, perhaps Bennett would emerge enlightened rather than eternally scheming out of greed and cowardice. If not, at least he now faced concrete consequences rather than leeching endlessly enabled. Either way, I could hold my head high, knowing the tangled web unraveling my life had finally been cut loose. The long walk towards trust and peace stretched ahead, but at least now I strode unencumbered by poisonous treachery masquerading as love. In the year following the implosion of my marriage, I slowly pieced my life back together while watching Bennett's continue unraveling. Having the truth exposed seemed to break something in my former husband, destroying the polished veneer hiding his corruption. He spiraled into depression and isolation as former friends and partners turned their backs. Last I heard, he planned to leave the state to escape the cloud of shame and failure. Meanwhile, I focused my energy on rebuilding a home with my kids and discovering new purpose in life. Going back to work full-time at the nonprofit I had left gave me a renewed sense of self-worth, using my skills to better my community. My sister Julia reached out just once in that year, a few months after our parents permanently exiled her from family gatherings. In a brief, stilted phone conversation, she apologized for betraying me while defending her actions as desperation rather than malice. I accepted her apology calmly. Julia would always view herself more as a victim of circumstance than accountable for her own choices. Nothing would change that tendency towards self-preservation at the cost of relationships. Nonetheless, saying goodbye to the sister I had once trusted and confided in stirred sorrow I couldn't deny. I focused instead on bonding with Corinne, who proved family extends far beyond blood relatives. On the anniversary of the spectacular implosion, Corinne brought over a bottle of wine and compassionate ear. We talked late into the night, revisiting the roller coaster revelations that upended our realities. Do you regret how everything played out? Corinne asked gently, catching my pensive gaze at one point. I considered before shaking my head slowly. I regret ever trusting manipulators disguised as loved ones, I admitted. But going through the fire has shown me my own strength. Corinne nodded, squeezing my hand in solidarity. You have so much courage, Alara. Don't ever doubt that. Her words soothed my soul and those painful memories flooded back. I had emerged wiser, recognizing the power I held as my own best champion. Later that night, after Corinne headed home, I tucked my slumbering children and pulled out my journal. I wrote candidly about grappling with the lasting wounds from deception and betrayals while acknowledging the growth taking root. My marriage may have been ruptured beyond repair, but I was stitching the broken pieces of myself into someone even stronger. Rather than bitterness or cynicism, now hope blossomed, hope for wisdom in discerning trust, rebuilding bonds, and renewing my own spirit. As I blew out the solitary candle flickering on my nightstand, I sensed a turning point passing. The last year held necessary devastations, crushing facades and false personas I had clung to. But on the other side lay freedom to embrace truth and authenticity, surrounding myself with people of integrity rather than simple charm or shared history. The vows and family I once built my entire existence around had disintegrated. But in their absence arose a woman who answered only to her own inner voice. Scars marked my journey through the rubble, yet they represented healing too. With my eyes wide open to both human cruelty and courage, I could finally see the long road ahead clearly. And I intended to walk forward steadily, unflinching, no more tangled webs stretching out to trip me, only horizons shining bright with promise. The long night behind me, I stepped into dawn.